This is the small town street where a little girl walks along. Despite her appearance of being around 5 or 6 years old, she was close to 8. Her short stature and slender build were the cause. They hung over her like a load of laundry, clothes that clearly didn't flatter her. The person in question was identified as Rosa. It could be argued that she was an orphan, but that would be untrue. It was only that her family had been hit by a misfortune. Living with her mother was a struggle for her, as she had to balance her job and caring for the child. She sold a range of products at the open-air market to provide food and clothing for Rosa and herself. She was paid hourly, which meant she worked no weekends and in any weather, even the rain, as the tattered canopy couldn't fully protect her from the bone-chilling winds. It was expected that she would become sick from such work, but since she wasn't currently employed, no one would be willing to cover her sick leave. Consequently, she was stationed at the counter due to her persistent cold. The clinic informed them that she had pneumonia and required hospitalization. "What is the best course of action for me to take with my daughter? I am not permitted to go to the hospital," she begged. "It's not necessary for me to make you believe it, so please seek medical advice. It is suggested to have a minimum of bed rest, and here are some medications you should take." She was unable to purchase most of the prescribed medicines due to the extensive list. She couldn't count on any help. Her parents had died of alcoholism many years ago, and she was never married or had any children. Upon learning of Rose's pregnancy, her father abandoned her mother. She had to take charge of everything herself. Her daughter attempted to assist by applying compresses and purchasing the cheapest medicines from the list. Nonetheless, those remedies were only helpful and had no impact. The fever kept getting worse, and they were unable to bring it down. From time to time, the mother entered a semi-delirious phase. Rose's initial aspiration was for her mother to improve gradually. Typically, it's the same with a cold. In the beginning, things get worse, but then you reach a certain point and start to recover. However, it was evident that this was not the reality. The sickness had become so severe that it was impossible to cure by itself. Rose walked down the street without comprehending the reason. It's possible that she wanted to have some food, maybe even a little chicken. She was aware that chicken broth can be helpful in relieving a cold. Although it wouldn't replace expensive drugs, it could potentially improve her mother's condition. The girl couldn't rely on themselves to obtain the medications. You cannot simply go to the pharmacy and inform your mother that she is dying, or that you lack the financial means to purchase medication. That picture was in front of her. Standing in front of the pharmacy counter, she made a somber plea. "Sonora, I need these medications and will be bringing them with me when my mother recovers and can earn some money." Rose's unhappiness was palpable as he wondered how Sonora would react to such a statement. She considered the possibility of attempting to make some money herself. She was unaware of how it could have happened. She is the only one who has ever worked as a child, and no one else. The idea of stealing was completely out of the question. Her eyes met with a strange sight that suddenly caught her gaze in the nearest garbage dump. She came closer and realized that the gleam was coming from a bank card on top of all the trash. Rosa retrieved it and scrutinized it closely. The card was accompanied by a small piece of paper that had 4 well-marked numbers on it. The pink code is the one that needs to be followed. Although it was rare, Rosa's mother had a bank card with no money on it. Occasionally, her mother would use the card to send her for groceries or withdraw cash from the nearest ATM. The girl had a clear understanding of how to handle such situations. The fact that it was in the trash led Rosa to believe that she had thrown it away. It's doubtful that anyone would require it if it were thrown away. With that in mind, she went to the nearest ATM without much hope of finding any money on the card. "Is there anyone who would throw away a card that had money on it? Provided there is, it would be advantageous. She has the option to buy medicine for her mother, or at least chicken for soup." Clearly, she was perplexed as to whether her actions were justified. What happens if the card is accidentally thrown away in the trash? Conversely, if someone could unintentionally dispose of money, it would suggest they didn't require it as much as they did. She was in a state of despair. If her mother didn't receive immediate aid, she could potentially die. As Rosa reflected on the thought, tears began to form in her eyes and she increased her speed. The girl checked the balance of the ATM before heading to the machine. Her eyes widened in surprise upon seeing the amount displayed on the screen. Until that point, she couldn't fathom how someone could possess such significant funds. Her estimation is that the amount she witnessed would suffice for her and her mother to live for almost a lifetime. Her doubts vanished without delay, and a wealthy individual wouldn't be bothered by her spending money on her mother's medication. It was not Rosa's intention to withdraw a substantial amount of money. She promptly made her way to the nearest drugstore after leaving the bank. She acquired all the necessary drugs for her mother. She accurately predicted that there was hardly any money left. Despite her current state of mind, Rosa was still consumed by the soothing soup of chicken and decided to make an effort to use the remaining funds to buy something at the grocery store. She came across a woman who appeared to be quite attractive, despite her young age, as she was leaving the pharmacy. With a watchful expression that Rosa couldn't comprehend, the woman glanced at her and then unexpectedly asked, "Did you use the nearest ATM to withdraw cash, little girl?" The woman's card was in her possession, and Rosa felt a trembling. It is probable that they would accuse her of theft, take her to the police, and leave the child without the opportunity to bring medicine to her mother. Tears streamed down her face once more. "I took it," she said in a candid manner. "After discovering this card in the trash, I believed it was no longer required. We are in dire need of the money, and you must be aware of this. My mother is unwell, and we are unable to obtain her medication." "Then, yes, really." The woman gently urged, "Keep calm. I'm aware that you didn't steal anything. The card was accidentally thrown away by my cleaner. Our office is nearby, and that's how it ended up in the trash. In addition, I am cognizant of the card's amount, and you took only a small quantity. You didn't do it for your own benefit, but rather to assist someone close to you." Rosa was unable to calm down and kept on saying sorry incoherently while also mumbling about her mother's illness. She presented the receipt and the medicine bag to demonstrate that she had spent the money in a proper manner. After a few minutes, she finally put her own end to the sobbing. "May I know your last name?" the lady inquired. The girl had a close call with Rosa. "Hello, I'm Sabina. Rosa, let's make an effort to buy your mother some more vitamins and groceries to alleviate her symptoms. Think of it as a token of appreciation for your knowledge." They went to the grocery store together and bought vitamins. A basket was filled with fruits, vegetables, milk, and Teresa's favorite, a much-needed chicken. It is certain that she would be capable of making excellent broth for her mother. Her cooking abilities were quite impressive when she was 7 years old. With Sabina's help, Rosa was able to bring the groceries home. She chose not to go inside, leaving everything in the hallway. The girl asked her rescuer to come and have a coffee with her, but she said no in return. She stated that she had been sick with a cold recently, so it's best for her to avoid people who are currently unwell. Furthermore, your mother is undoubtedly tasked with more pressing matters. Kindly bring my phone number with you in case of any issues. In recognition of the woman's kindness, Rosa gave her mother a dose of medicine and started cooking the broth. The state of semi-delirium was a constant worry for her due to her mother's condition. The girl was anxious that aid would be rendered too late. It was a fortnight. The woman's condition deteriorated further, and Rosa was unable to provide her with food or convince her to take the medication. Ultimately, she lost touch with reality, and Rosa resolved to call an ambulance. Despite the pleas, Mom was taken to the hospital where she refused to bring the girl in. The girl, who was uncertain about what to do next, contacted Sabina's number and explained the situation with a screeful voice. "My apologies for being upset. As the situation grew more severe, my mother was taken to the hospital and they are not permitting me to enter. I am clueless about what to do." The girl expressed her remorse, saying she had no one else to turn to. "Rosa, don't worry, vidi Sabina replied softly. "I'll be there to discuss everything with you." She arrived in a mere half-hour. "I've been pondering, Rosa." She started almost right from the doorstep. "Stay with us temporarily, if that's what you want. There's a considerable amount of room in our house and my spouse won't take it." "Were you informed by the doctors about the hospital your mother was taken to?" Rosa nodded and was unable to respond with any words. "Good day. I'll go to that place now and have a conversation with the physicians. It's possible that we can offer additional assistance to her. There's no need to worry. Everything will be all right." They went straight to Sabina's house after Rosa agreed to stay with her. The neighborhood, with its identical five-story buildings, seemed to be a completely different world. They were transported to a private area where numerous streets were lined with grand residences. One of the mansions was where Rosa's savior lived. Sabina left the girl in the care of her husband, who had a day off, to visit Rosa's mother at the hospital. She went to the reception area upon her arrival at the clinic. She said, "Hello. Ida Vargas was due to be brought here a couple of hours ago. To whom were you addressing her?" lazily asked the girl who was at the registration desk. Without even a glance, Sabina, her mother, lied. In her 50-plus years of life, she had learned that no one in the hospital would communicate with someone who was not related to the patient. However, they did not go as far as to ensure the level of kinship stated. The girl at the desk began using her computer keyboard to type. She glanced at Sabina from a higher position. "She's in a grave condition. At present, there is a ban on visiting. Is it possible for me to communicate with her doctor?" It goes without saying that. "The 23rd office is located on the second level. You're fortunate. It's been in transit for several hours." Sabina went into the office and conversed with the doctor. The dialogue was brief and focused on business matters. Sabina indicated that the cheat had enough funds and asked to have Ida moved to a different room. She also mentioned that she would be willing to spare money for medications and treatment options. She affirmed that she would cover all the things that are not included in free health care. "I don't care how much it is, just do what I have to do and send the bill." She was unable to do much more than that for the sick woman. Consequently, satisfied with her task, she headed back to her home. She had faith in her husband, but still wanted to ensure the girl's well-being. It was only a woman's duty to provide her with the care and support she required. The ideal candidate would be a mother, of course. In this situation, she was not given the freedom to make her own decision. Rosa was found to be in a state of depression by her. The opulent surroundings of the house she found and didn't impress her. She couldn't cope with the fact that she was assigned a different room, which is coveted by many children from less privileged backgrounds. She sat on the bed, hanging one leg and nervously shaking it. The girl rushed towards Sabina when she entered the room. "I'm curious. What exactly is it?" "What is your opinion on Mom?" she asked with a bit of hesitation. "She is currently being treated by doctors. Your mother is going through a tough time, as you've seen. However, her life is not at risk. It was partially a deception. The body cannot be expected to handle the illness with such advanced stage pneumonia, even with proper medical treatment. She was unable to communicate to a 7-year-old that her beloved mother was on the brink of death, prepared to cross it at any time. 3 days were spent in a state of intense anticipation. Despite believing the woman's words, Rosa still couldn't shake off her anxiety. The hospital eventually conveyed to them that the crisis had dissipated and there was no longer any possibility of harming the patient. It is clear that there will be a prolonged course of treatment, but it can now be confident that it will work. Sabina was able to help Rosa's mother recover quickly. Sabina was granted permission to visit her after a few days when her condition improved significantly. The woman persuaded Rosa to go even though she had a desire to wait for her mother's complete recovery. In actuality, she was uncertain about whether their conversation would be appropriate for a child to hear. "Hello, sweetheart. I am Sabina, and while it may seem strange, I want to make it clear to the hospital staff that I identify you as your mother. I had to employ this maneuver, or else nobody would approach me. You paid for my treatment?" Ada replied, "I'm very much in your line, but honestly, I don't even know what to make of it. Your daughter's response was that you should thank me, not Sabina. She's extremely concerned about your well-being. I can assure you that she's staying with me and doing okay." The woman briefly recounted how she came across Rosa after locating her bank card. "I'm at a loss for words to express my gratitude towards you. You have no more to offer me, and the money you spent on me seems like it won't be repaid in my lifetime," Sabina replied with a generous amount of money. "I had a strong attraction to you and Rosa, so I wanted to be there for you, not solely due to pity, although that's part of the reason." "Can you describe the circumstances that led to your unpleasant encounter, and we'll take measures to avoid a repeat of such an experience?" "The most significant appreciation for me would be if you and your daughter are provided with warmth, sustenance, and protection. What is the reason for my presence in this place? It's a customary tale I choose. Instead of pursuing education and employment, I chose to develop feelings for Rosa's dad. The next day was right after school. I didn't attend university and assumed that it was a minor issue as I might find employment in the following year. I became pregnant, and the man left me without delay. He declared that he was not prepared for the responsibility and complexity involved. I was unable to study, so I had to work to provide for Rosa and myself. My parents were not involved in my upbringing, and they both died after drinking excessively. The poor conditions at the market where I work caused me to become ill. Sabina listened to her story and said, "That's the thing. Avoid market trading as it can ruin you. I'm seeking a replacement for my housekeeper who recently quit. Bring your daughter and me indoors. There are plenty of empty spaces in the house. The compensation package is adequate. Rosa will attend a high-quality school, and you won't require any money. If necessary, I'll cover your absence." Ida was unable to believe her luck. At a time when it seemed like everything was going to break down, this woman suddenly appeared and offered to solve all the problems without delay. She was obligated to accept the offer that was being made. Sabina chuckled and extended an extended expression of gratitude to Ida. They said goodbye. Sabina was eventually persuaded by Rosa to bring her to see her mother a few days later. The two individuals seemed overjoyed to reunite after their first meeting, and it appeared that they had finally found inner serenity and stopped worrying about each other. The mother and daughter were given some time to talk privately before Sabina took the girl home. They were not received with hospitality at their home, as Diana, Sabina's daughter, was present and had unexpectedly arrived during that period. Her mother and father were unaware of her whereabouts. She stated that she was an adult and had no knowledge of anyone in the room when asked about it. It was accurate to say that she had reached 25 years of age earlier this year. Despite this, her parents were deeply worried about her potential involvement with the wrong crowd, as there were indications of such behavior. Despite their efforts, they were powerless and typically only saw Diana when she had money left and then returned to demand additional funds. She expressed her dissatisfaction with her appearance by standing at the door. It appeared that her mother was the one who caused her upset. It was apparent that the girl's words were true. "What kind of charity work are you doing here?" Diana grew angry without any means of greeting. "You're using our family's finances to fund some rascals. You're inviting only anyone into the house. Is there anything on this list that you're curious about? If this girl were to steal our money, what would be the consequences?" "Diana, good day. I'm so glad to see you," Sabina replied. "Kindly avoid creating a situation in front of the child. Would it be appropriate to bring the girl to her room and talk about everything?" "It is not true. Is it true that the girl has a separate room in this place?" "What a relief. What's the next step? Will you be escorting her mother with her? We want this house to be our family home, not a shelter for the homeless." "Diana, I've posed a question," and the woman's voice became more muted. "Let's enter, please. This house is still my property, and I have the authority to do what feels right for me." She used these words to guide Rosa past the angry girl, escorted her upstairs, and asked her not to leave the room for the next hour. The girl heard the argument downstairs and was aware that she was involved. Within a few minutes, everything became quiet. The stairs were accompanied by footsteps and a knock on the door. Rosa was hesitant to invite anyone, as she was not used to such indulgence. The person in question was Diana. "I am sorry for what I said to her downstairs, but she resisted and spoke. My behavior was extremely discourteous. I have no objection to staying with you and Mom for a while." The tone of her voice was quite different, and Rosa could understand it. Following my recovery, I made the decision to live with her rescuer. The news that they would be permanently residing in this house filled Rosa with excitement. The homeowners' company and the surrounding luxury had already made her well accustomed to them. Moreover, Sabina fulfilled her pledge by enrolling her in a new school and top-notch gymnasium. Fortunately, the girl's abilities were sufficient to clear the preliminary examination. Antonio, Sabina's spouse, was a very pleasant person to be around and read, as well as being highly intelligent. Like his wife, Ida found it effortless to establish a shared language with him. They would occasionally converse for hours on end over a cup of coffee. Ida worked tirelessly to meet her responsibilities, which was why the homeowner had to remind her that excessive work can have negative effects on one's health. Ida, Please remove the clothing. She stated that there is no dust on this shelf. Generally, you are aware that you have a structured workday that concluded 2 hours ago. My job required you to work as a maid, not as an employee. Have a drink of coffee, please. Today's school lesson is something that Rosa is excited to share with her mother. They were doing well, except for one thing: Diana. The girl was Ida's companion, but behaved as if she were still 16 years old. She refrained from attending school or working, instead spending her money on dining places and high-end boutiques. Her father and mother were obviously disappointed, but they couldn't deny their daughter. Sabina frequently expressed dissatisfaction with her lack of understanding about the reason for her behavior and the gap in her upbringing. Can you shed light on my daughter's disposition? The members of our family are always hardworking, but my husband and I weren't always millionaires. Our initial job was as average engineers, but we earned it by working hard. Diana was not fond of Ida. The mother's use of time and money in market trading may have been motivated by jealousy and a lack of understanding. Occasionally, she would attempt to bite the girl, invoking her previous occupation, her inability to dress stylishly, or her financial situation. She had a particular fondness for Rosa as the topic of choice. Rather, the fact that Ida was raising her alone without a father. Diana had been in a committed relationship for several years. She appeared to be very proud of this fact. As if she were talking to her friend on the phone, she would say that strange girls who pick someone up and then ask why they got dumped are loud enough for Ida. That's not how my Roberto is. I would never choose a man who would impregnate you and then abandon you. His fiancée GC was troubled by Roberto's troubles. Ida found it effortless to dispel Diana's teasing comments. She had been subjected to a lot of negative comments while working. She maintained her composure and disregarded all the details while working. Roberto, who would throw ambiguously, looks at her. During Diana's absence, he would give some unsatisfying compliments. To put it simply, he was a man who preferred women to be with their partners. Regrettably, as the daughter of the homeowners, she would have detected these indications if she hadn't been so consumed with self-indulgence. She was undoubtedly in love with her, and certain that her partner had strong feelings for her. Ida, on the other hand, was fully aware that if Roberto was in love with someone else, it was solely due to her parents' wealth. He was dating Diana, a young woman, for the sake of his money. If you could have another lovely girl to love, you would be content. The duration and conclusion of the story were uncertain if a substantial amount of money had not been stolen from the homeowner's safe. The fact that Sabina and Antonio were extroverts and frequently visited their home suggests that anyone could have taken a similar view. Diana had her own account of the money's disappearance, as it happens. You were an unappreciative snake. As soon as Sabina gathered everyone for a family meeting, she informed them of the situation and attacked Ida. How do you repay my parents' devotion to bringing you back from the dead, as if they're not providing you with the necessary pay for your unimportant work? It's possible that your daughter took it. She has already been caught stealing. Diana, please don't proceed. Her mother abruptly halted. Ida's theft of that money is beyond my comprehension. Are there any other individuals in this group? The girl didn't give up. Is it your opinion that I did it? I didn't say that. It's unknown what might have taken place. I believe it's necessary to get in touch with law enforcement. Give them the opportunity to scrutinize everything. Prior to that, if any of you require the money, regardless of the motive, I recommend confessing immediately and not engaging with law enforcement. By tomorrow, they can return all the items that were stolen and pretend as if it never happened. Diana promptly responded by rejoining her mockery. Take it upon yourself to leave our house and return to your market. It's possible that incarceration would be more beneficial, Diana. She was interrupted by her mother once more. I won't take any chances with unfounded accusations. I've conveyed my intended message. Time to think. I'm giving all of you a chance. Despite her innocence, Ida had a very disturbed night's sleep. She was aware that if the police were involved, nobody would take an interest in investigating anything. No proof was needed to prove that the woman who had been taken in as a maid out of compassion stole money from the trustworthy homeowners. However, she sensed a slight alteration in the way she was treated. Despite their impeccably polite behavior, the homeowners seemed to have a slight coldness towards her. Although Sabina had doubts about Ida's thief-like behavior, it was evident that she had concerns. If the money were to magically appear in the safe tomorrow, it's highly probable that everyone would assume she was at fault. Regardless of her perspective, the situation appeared to be completely hopeless. Diana may have taken her parents' money without seeking to frame her. Ida had no motive to steal, after all. Without any questioning, her parents would have given her almost anything in the world. It was closer to 1 o'clock in the evening when Rosa arrived in her room. The girl in the adjacent room must have heard her mother tossing and turning in bed, as she was unable to doze off. It's conceivable that she arrived to find out what had taken place. Ida had already reflected on her intentions. Her daughter was the only one, not herself. In what way could she clarify to Rosa why they were sent back to hell without warning? It seemed almost inevitable to her that they would have to leave their homes, she said. Her daughter's visit was not accompanied by questions or comfort, but rather with a solution to her own problem, which she was unaware of. The girl started off with unexpected words that Ida was not expecting to hear. "Mom, please forgive me." "What is the purpose?" she asked with aplomb, fearing the worst-case scenario. "I am aware that eavesdropping on conversations is not advisable, and adults may engage in discussions about topics that are off-limits to children. I'm aware of what you were talking about in the kitchen today, as it happened. I am aware of the person who took the money you were referring to. The sight of him doing it made me wonder if Rita and her peers had permitted him to do it. Just in case, I snapped a picture of it on my mobile device." Ida showed her daughter how clever she was as a child. Moreover, diplomatic measures are also taken. Sabina gifted Rosa a smartphone on her birthday not too long ago. No objections were raised by the girl's mother. She didn't even bother to think about it. She pointed out that people need phones now, not just for studying, and there are numerous other things they can spend their money on. Let it be. At the most unexpected of times, this smartphone was able to assist. It was obvious that there was no money in the safe the next day. Despite being unusually quiet, Diana's expression was marked by a malicious smile. The hated maid's fate seemed to be sealed in her mind for eternity. Nevertheless, she was taken aback by an extremely unpleasant surprise. Despite her kindness and gentleness, Ida had to try to suppress her own shot in Florida. This girl had caused her many bad dreams, but now she had the chance to make her feel better. It's possible that she will eventually acknowledge the mistaken behavior she had been doing for so long. What's the next step? Despite her sorrow, Sabina opened the safe and confirmed that the missing money had not magically appeared. "It appears that we'll need to contact law enforcement, except when someone is willing to share something with me at this moment," Ida commenced. "You must be patient." Diana appeared triumphant through her eyes, and her mother's face became disheartened. "I have evidence, and I know who took the money. The thief was caught on camera by Rosa after she saw him. She began recording footage using her smartphone in a way that everyone could see. Despite the angle, it was still possible to identify the person taking the money from the safe and shutting it with care. Diana's partner, Roberto, was the one in question. The homeowners, however, chose not to call the police. Roberto wasn't a stranger to the situation. He was only instructed to return the money and threatened to report him if he didn't comply with their demands. Roberto was filled with anger towards Diana, both at her parents and herself. Right in their house, he caused a humiliating incident. He yelled out that they had enough money and were unable to spare a small amount that was essential for him. He ultimately stated that he had no interest in conversing with impudent individuals, including their daughter. The door was slammed by him as he stormed off. Despite Ida's expectations, this situation didn't seem to have any negative impact on Diana. On the contrary, she became more unbearable. The moment the door closed behind her unmistakable ex-fiancé, she carried on with the scene with twice the ferocity. "A random girl has the ability to steal money from your card," she yelled at her mother. "But your daughter's partner cannot borrow any money. It's just a small amount of money. You wouldn't even notice. Have you been informed that your fiancé was the recipient of the money? What is the significance, as per her mother? It holds significance. Neither you nor him have ever been denied any small expenses. Nonetheless, the amount is quite significant this time. If it was for a noble cause, we would have given it, and he was aware of the reason. Tonio contended that there was something we didn't like about it. You don't give me any pleasure for anything related to me." Diana persisted in throwing a tantrum. "You've caused someone's life to be ruined. I share the same sentiment." The door was slammed by her as she stormed out of the kitchen. In the hallway, she encountered Ada while he was dusting the hangers and trying to ignore the growing argument in the kitchen. The situation was difficult as Diana's cries reached such a high level that the entire house could hear her. Ada was content that her daughter was at school and not subjected to any form of distress. You. Diana immediately turned her attention to Ada upon seeing her. It's all because of you. The moment you entered this house, I knew it wouldn't be a good day. Count me in. You're such an intelligent girl. You can record a video on your phone to catch the thief up and running. I had faith in it. The fact that you couldn't keep your man and ended up in a misunderstanding between us is heartbreaking. But Roberto and I have strong feelings for each other. Diana, I would have aimed to make her understand my point. Are you unable to see? Your money was the only thing that Roberto cared about. He quickly ran away after realizing he couldn't put his hands in your parents' pockets anymore. I don't want to belittle him like that. You're hesitant to mention his name. How much courage do you still have to offer to talk to me? In the ensuing days, Ada's home transformed into a hilly terrain where she worked tirelessly to safeguard her child. Even so, Rosa was exposed to the ongoing arguments that had erupted over minor issues. The act of showing the recording and doing it led to 4 girls feeling guilty. Nonetheless, she had no intention of harming her mother. Despite Diana's repeated threats that she would never return to the house, she didn't take any breaks from it. Instead, she crafted scenes that were shameful to both Ada and her parents. The only thing she had to do was refrain from having explicit confrontations in front of the child. After another scandal, Sabina stated that we need to all move on, she and all of us. Her heart has been shattered. Her affection for that scoundrel appears to have been genuine, but now she's experiencing his disloyalty. It is certain to go smoothly. Her voice trembled as she spoke with confidence. Ada could perceive that her composer's position would be compromised by the aging family leader. She felt deeply sorry for this beautiful woman, but she couldn't fathom how she could lend a hand. Furthermore, she felt remorseful for everything that had transpired in recent times. However, one day, everything changed. Diana's realization of everything and her ability to calm down would have made it a pleasant experience. Nevertheless, the cause was entirely distinct and regrettably dismal. Despite the tragedy that occurred, all residents wanted to go back to the days when the kitchen was filled with the daughter's cries of joy. While Ada was reading on her bed, Diana unexpectedly entered the room. It appeared at one point that she was about to start another argument, but the next moment it became evident that something had happened. The girl's face was as white as chalk, and she was wiping tears down her cheeks. She found it difficult to say, Dad got into an accident. He's currently in the hospital. He requires a blood transfusion. Your mother is asking if you would like to donate blood with us. Since his blood type is uncommon, having more options is preferable. It was only natural for the woman to reply. Without elaborating on the details that she didn't know, she informed Rosa that Antonio was seriously ill and required assistance. As a result, it was necessary for all the adults to depart temporarily. As a result, you'll be responsible for managing the household. According to her, it was advisable to behave like yourself. Naturally, Mommy. They promptly gathered their belongings and went to the hospital. Sabina expressed her desire to drive herself, but they collaborated to convince her to wait for a driver. Her hands were shaking, and that's why she shouldn't be driving. They arrived at the blood transfusion facility an hour later. For compatibility testing and various other necessary analyses, samples were obtained from each individual one in a step-by-step manner. In the corridor, the 3 women held their breath and waited for the results, jumping whenever the doors opened. They were all aware that time was running out. Diana clung tightly to his hand, behaving carelessly, swaying her legs, sniffling, and occasionally weeping in a state of mourning. The last thing I said to my deceased father was that he wouldn't die. Despite cutting her off, Sabina's voice was not the conviction she sought to convey. The girl's trembling was ignored as I tried to calm her down. Despite the strain on her relationship with Diana, she felt sorry for the girl. It's possible that her parents' spoiled upbringing had caused her to feel unloved and faced challenges in her life. They were both experiencing a mutual grief that brought them closer together. Ada had come to view Antonio as a father figure who was almost her own selves. Her life had never been influenced by her biological father. The only thing bothering her parents was the presence of alcohol in the house. Sabina and Antonio had taken over from her mother and father, providing her with the warmth she desperately needed during her childhood. After some time, the office door was finally opened and a doctor appeared. He looked extremely confused. Despite the news he was conveying, it was impossible to discern. Despite their expectations, the three of them were unprepared for what they would hear in the next few minutes. Frankly speaking, it was not the most suitable occasion to bring up this matter, but Diana, you are not our patient's kin. Sabina was the target of the final sentence, and you are not alone. Unfortunately, your blood is not fit for transfusion. They all tried to understand what was said, but it just didn't sit well with the three of them. The sound was nonsensical. What was the significance of Diana's being not related to Sabina or Antonio? How could that be? The last statement about the blood's inadequacy was somewhat overshadowed by the shock it caused. In the interim, the physician gave them a briefing to comprehend the information and proceeded. Ida Vargas, your blood is a perfect match. I cannot provide a detailed explanation, but your relationship with our patient is significant. Ida's blood donation to Antonio was arranged by her as there was no more time for speculation. It was only an hour later when the complicated procedure began, which aimed to save his life. A collective hush was heard. There was always a possibility that something could go wrong, especially with the severity of the patient's condition. However, the best doctors who could be found in a matter of hours were fighting for Antonio's life. Finding the appropriate blood for him was one of the most arduous endeavors. It took several hours, but the operation was successful. Antonio was stable but in critical condition, with the primary risks to his life removed. They were left with no choice but to entrust his care to the doctors and wait for him to wake up, so that he could continue talking to family and friends. The doctor's words left Sabina feeling indifferent. She persuaded both girls to undergo a DNA test. The doctor at the donor center was persuaded. Ida was discovered to be a blood relative, possibly her daughter. Diana was not associated with either of them. Sabina enlisted the help of private investigators to solve this case. The investigation they conducted was relatively simple in its findings. The town's population grew at a slow pace due to its small size. The number of births was limited, and they were relatively rare. Hence, on the given date, just 2 women gave birth in one of the 3 maternity hospitals. Sabina was included in the group. During that period, Sabina's family was not yet wealthy and couldn't afford a private room, so she lived in an open, shared room. It was alleged that only one individual was allowed to share her room, which is almost like VIP service without any additional fees. Sabina recollected their experience and her roommate's stay in the hospital. The woman was not very talkative, but she consistently muttered and complained about life. It would have been tough to initiate a dialogue with her. Despite her actions, she didn't cause any problems, leading to her being ignored by others. Sabina's pregnancy was not met with the same level of visits from her husband, parents, and friends as it was for other expectant mothers. Her family's background was unfortunate, and it seemed like she would continue with this remarginalized way of life after giving birth. It was a shame for this individual who had never been desired by anyone prior to her birth. Even so, there was nothing that could be done about it. Both women had babies within 24 hours of each other, and both gave birth to girls. Both babies were healthy and strong, bringing happiness to their mothers. Following their release, the 4 individuals had to spend a few more days in the hospital. Sabina, who had a tough game, couldn't quite remember what happened next. She didn't take notice of the substitution, which is why. One of the midwives was responsible for carrying it out. It was not long before the hospital administration became aware of it, but it had already been disclosed by both mothers who had been released. The decision was made, as is often the case with government establishments, particularly those situated in small towns. They abandoned everything they had done as it was impossible to discreetly correct the situation at that time. They only terminated the employment of the midwife, who ended up in psychiatric care for life. The baby's replacement was likely the reason for her placement there. Despite her behavior, nobody seemed to be interested in exploring the reasons behind it. Despite the mental disorder, the detectives were able to uncover the motives behind her behavior, which ultimately turned out to be pure jealousy. She had determined that if she was unhappy, no one in this world should be happy. In particular, the wealthy woman who was able to become pregnant and deliver a baby. It was a coincidence that Sabina happened to be the woman. The midwife had a strong desire to have children, but her attempts were unsuccessful. Initially, she struggled to get pregnant for several months, and when it did, it was revealed that she was not in the right physical state to have a child. Thus, she suffered a miscarriage at an early stage. Ever since, she has felt resentment towards women who are capable of having children but not her. She stayed in her job as she had no other options, so she didn't quit. She began to lose her composure as she watched happy mothers whom she had also helped bring into the world year after year. Naturally, nobody took notice. While Sabina was giving birth, the woman's mind suddenly exploded. The mother's abundance of positive qualities, complemented by a loving husband, supportive family members, an excellent job, and promising futures, could have been the reason. Above everything else, there is a child. The midwife made the choice to alter her life's purpose and exchanged a baby with an uninvolved person who she had given birth to almost simultaneously. Whether you prefer it or not, genetics will reveal itself. Raising another child is a difficult task for this woman, especially when dealing with someone of that nature. Sabina and Antonio's biological daughter was raised by alcoholic parents who failed to give her the attention she deserved. In the meantime, Diana looked after herself and was placed in a family that was bound to reach great wealth in the coming years. They were living a relatively comfortable life during that time. The midwife believed that the girl's character was not solely determined by her upbringing, but rather by genetic factors. Her actions were a result of that reason. Furthermore, she was of the opinion that all her parents' wealth and accomplishments were hers by birth. "What's the next step?" Diana inquired after being told this story. "What's the next step?" Sabina was taken aback. "I should clarify that I am not your biological daughter and, generally speaking, have no right to be here. Don't be stupid," her mother retorted. "I have been providing you with nourishment, education, nurturing, and loving you for many years. What is the reason for my inability to love you? Can you tell me who your biological parents are and if they have switched newborns? It's only appropriate that you consider me to be your mother. It's clear to you, Mama, that I have affection for you as well." Diana's eyes filled with tears and she quickly hugged Sabina. I had witnessed this scene with a sense of unease, unaware of what to do at the moment. Her true parents were the affluent couple who had provided so much joy and happiness to her daughter. Nevertheless, they had not nurtured her, heard her first speech, and witnessed her initial movements. Her first grade from school and her first mechanic were not brought home by them. Although the people who had brought her up didn't pay much attention to either of those things. Despite everything, she still loved them as much as she loved her parents. There were also moments of positivity. Despite their efforts, they had not starved her and raised her. Despite dressing and shooting her, they refrained from hitting her or any other form of aggression. Despite not being particularly happy, her childhood was not entirely terrible. Despite drinking frequently, her parents were never involved in any violent behavior. Whenever they ran out of alcohol, they typically dozed off and bought a new bottle the next day. The family would not suffer from hunger every time one of them found an unusual job. It wasn't always the most miserable life, despite not being entirely well-fed. Her mind would have had recollections of her early years when her mother was in rehab. During that time, her father was already intoxicated, but had not yet completely removed his wife from the brink of death. She devoted herself to taking care of the baby, who she evidently had a personal connection with. I remember her mother rejoicing at her first steps and reading her bedtime stories when she was younger than Rosa. Despite feeling upset, she was able to reach out to her mother for help. She expressed her pride and happiness in her daughter's small and minor accomplishments. She gradually lost interest in things, whether she was dressed, wearing clothes, or eating well, but she would come back to her daily. Her daughter's stories left a lasting impression on her mother. The only thing that piqued this woman's interest was the choice to have either the desired bottle or none. Had she found her husband's strength, things could have possibly gone differently. She held on to him for some reason, whether it was because of her habit or fear that she wouldn't be able to live on her own. The father appeared to be uninterested in the family's affairs, but she may not have been aware of it. I'd have made an effort to study with determination and rebelled. On several occasions, she has even escaped from home for an extended period. She was not the focus of anyone's attention. The story concluded predictably, and her parents committed suicide by drinking themselves. Upon returning home, she discovered them deceased. Her 18th birthday was celebrated on that day. Did she experience any emotions? Oddly enough, yes. Despite everything, she was heartbroken by her parents' loss and felt thankful for their ability to help her reach adulthood. She was aware that they had a deep affection for her. Her mother was at least a part of it. Essentially, Sabina was an unknown individual to everyone and had become involved in it out of empathy and kindness. Ida felt a strong connection with this woman and expressed her gratitude. However, she was uncertain about the reciprocity of her feelings. The woman expressed that she has enough space for both daughters, as if her words were being read. In fact, I always thought it would be great if Diana had a little brother or sister. The difficulty of the first childbirth prevented me from daring to have another one. She embraced that with great affection. Diana was joined in the hug by Ida, who felt it only seconds later. A family that had been lost for a long time appeared to have come together in utter amazement. This picture was not completed due to the absence of more than one person. Antonio was released from the hospital only a few months later, despite progress. Little Rosa and the rest of the family visited him until that point. The man was taken aback by the story of the baby switch, as expected. Like Sabina, he was content to have 2 daughters now. After committing the abhorrent crime, Diana expressed regret to her parents and later to Ida, whom she had treated as an only sister. Her decision was not solely based on her being the non-biological daughter. Nayli's death in an accident had a significant impact on her, leading her to reconsider some actions. The girl was convinced that Ida's assistance during her trying times had been unjust. The shared sorrow brought them together, enabling them to comprehend each other and develop a certain mutual understanding. They came to the realization that they were more connected than they had initially believed. They gently spoke to little Rosa, without any hint of surprise, omitting all the details about what had occurred. Her young mind still had such stories to think about the world. The girl was happy to have Grandma and Grandpa as a family. Despite Diana's previous behavior, she eventually grew to love her aunt. She endeavored to make amends with her parents, Ida and her daughter. By the time Antonio fully recovered, their extended family had all gathered around and lived in the same grand mansion. The father organized a family meeting for all the adults after his return, which took place sometime later. The time of day he chose was when Rosa was at school, to prevent her from hearing anything that was not important. The meeting was arranged for a specific purpose, and it was unlikely that the child would be asked to attend. Since I regained consciousness, I've been reflecting on the past. You recounted to me how Ida and Diana were swapped in the maternity ward, which caused me to lose all my thoughts for a while. Then the thoughts again came to mind, and I have to emphasize that the accident I was in wasn't a mere coincidence. Antonio's words were utterly misunderstood, leaving everyone to their own devices. The father had just informed them that someone had attempted to kill them, and it seemed like they all came to a similar conclusion in his characteristic soft voice. They were all taken aback and terrified by the revelation. No one had the courage to speak. The continuation of his speech was eagerly awaited by everyone. I suspect that someone tampered with my brakes, but there's also the possibility that somebody pushed me off the road and into that exact ravine where my car crashed. I'm uncertain as my memory recalls the moment of the fall with great sadness. When the brakes were supposed to be there, I can only recall that they didn't work. I had just finished a routine checkup and everything was in order. However, if that's the case, it implies that someone who had knowledge of my travel plans did so. Is there anyone who would wish to harm you? Diana was horrified and spoke her words. Antonio's tone was used to make you think that it was just a joke. Honestly speaking, I'm uncertain. And that's precisely what annoys me the most. It's possible that someone singled me out, just like anyone else or their entire family. And in that situation, all of you are at risk. That's the reason why I brought you together. I urge you to maintain vigilance until the culprit is caught. Today, I will submit a report to the police and allow them to investigate. Consequently, they proceeded with the report, and the police initiated their investigation. They were aware that they were investigating a person of influence in the town. and therefore conducted the investigation with the greatest care. Antonio's concerns were validated by the confirmation of brake damage, which was followed by an inspection of the car. Moreover, the presence of some density on the body was not due to the fall into the ravine. As a result, his vague memory of the car being pushed was verified. It was hoped that their plan would work without exception, and Antonio wouldn't make it out alive. The family was informed of the discovery, prompting the hiring of armed security for each member. Rosa was among the group, and they explained that her two aunts and Ida wanted a woman to protect her daughter so that she could feel comfortable in temporary care. Currently, it was forbidden to venture out. Despite the cleverness of her appearance, the young woman chose not to argue, realizing that such limitations wouldn't be enforced without justification. Before each trip, the guards made sure that all vehicles were checked. Fortunately, there were no other suspicious findings, but nobody was willing to let their guard down. The perpetrator may have abandoned their plans after the failed attempt, possibly as a precautionary measure. It's possible that they had a personal vendetta against Antonio, not against the entire family. Nonetheless, being careful is always recommended. In the interim, the inquiry was in full swing. Despite thorough questioning of all family members, there was no indication of suspicious behavior on that day. The extent of Antonio's concern was too great to believe that someone wanted to kill them. Their joint venture with his wife was conducted in a sincere manner, without any attempt to deceive anyone. By the town's standards, they were quite valuable, but not enough for anyone to want to spend time with them or anything of that nature. I want to say sorry for the misunderstanding. The updated translation, with dashes to indicate direct speech, is presented below. The investigation's initial inference that the assassination attempt was connected to the business was deemed inconclusive. They commenced developing the notion that it could be a personal vendetta. At that point, the first and only suspect appeared. Diana's ex-partner had been involved in a significant dispute within this family. He had only a few motives to seek retribution. Despite the fact that Antonio was not interested in him, it was quite hard to imagine that he would attempt to kill him due to his ban on money stealing. Diana had already recognized that Roberto was an untrustworthy individual by that time. A murderer is not the same as a scammer or thief. Additionally, he refrained from making any threats against his family. He slammed the door to his left. He remained unnoticed by all. Diana made an effort to contact her ex-husband for a while, but he didn't return any calls. Roberto was not known by any of them, in other words. Did he have a job or study? To whom did he report? What did he do in his free time? What was the identity of his parents? All of that had to be investigated by the police. After some time, they came to the realization that he had a reason to want Antonio's death. According to the investigator, they have discovered that the person who attempted to kill you was the actual perpetrator. Nevertheless, you can disregard the security personnel. He won't bother you anymore. What is the basis for your certainty? Antonio asked. He is no longer alive. We didn't have to scout for too long. The discovery of his body was made in his house. Roberto was discovered to have engaged in significant financial mismanagement and had a passion for gambling. He had been fortunate for some time. He was turned down by fate and discovered that he had a significant amount of money to serious criminal investigators. It was never their intention to wait for him to marry Diana and receive the money in a more or less formal way. He opted to steal, hoping that the recent appearance made in the house would not lead to an investigation and blame it all on himself. The plan was unsuccessful, and he had no other option but to obtain a substantial amount of money. It was then that Roberto realized it was over. He was certain that the individuals he had become involved with would come after him and claim his life or wealth. He resolved that he wouldn't die alone and attempted to bring along the person credited with his misfortunes. The investigator concluded his testimony by thanking him. Your diligence and commitment have resulted in the exposure of the gang we have been tracking for years. In the near future, they will all be confined to their proper place of detention. The family finally found peace after weeks of turmoil. After the security guards were released, Rosa was able to meet her school friends once more. A large number of guests returned to the house and were pleased to see them. After months of deliberation, persuasion, and negotiations, the family finally decided to get a dog after Rosa's strong desire. The girl lives up to her commitments by walking, feeding, and grooming the puppy. Despite her current situation, she is doing well in school and has aspirations of becoming a veterinarian. Eventually, Ida and Diana formed a strong bond and spent many hours of free time together. Diana got her act together and went to college, realizing that there is always a chance for success in any profession. It was the dream of Sabina and Antonio that their daughters would aid them in managing the business and eventually take charge.